So we've got a list of questions that have been put in the Q&A and people have been upvoted. And we'll start with Julie. Hi, Julie. Welcome back.
Hi again.
Yeah. So this question from a first-time caller. Are book clubs reading UX specific books or books that are read and spoken about from a UX lens? I see this working just to get to know various colleagues on a personal level as well. But curious what kind of books y'all read.
Yeah, so we did start with classics like the UX books everybody talks about, which is Design of Everyday Things, Don Norman. That's pretty high level UX. It's interesting and good. And we did Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, who should update that book. That's just my personal opinion, but it is still great. It had a lot of great resources, but I think the last edition of it is from the teens, and the web looks different a bit now. We do generally stick with UX books, but we did pick out some chapters from Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. And you could also do those Dan Ayerly books where they're talking about cognitive behavior, behavioral economics type stuff does really apply to UX decision-making. So we do that. We also pick a lot of titles from Rosenfeld Media in a book apart. Rosenfeld Media is it's all about UX books. So there are some really good titles in there, like UX Team of One that gives everybody practical tactics to use. And then there's some good design UX crossover books from a book apart that really, I think Philip answered this a little earlier, but we read a good book that was an Eric Meyer and I forget the other author's name, but it was about thinking about consequences of your design and your language and all of that stuff. And that was a good read too, that is really applicable to everybody, even if you're a developer. So hope that answers it.
It does. Thank you. The one question that, maybe you want to address real quick is, do you find those book club readings as a good opportunity to just get to know your teammates on a personal level? And what positive effects have you seen from the unintended consequences of doing this?
Yeah, because one, people show up late, so you need to chit chat for the first 5-10 minutes of book club is generally open season on what you're eating for lunch and that kind of thing. I think we definitely, as a book club, do know each other probably a little bit more than other folks in the company get the opportunity to, because we do spend every 2 weeks, we spend an hour together or 45 minutes together, all talking and doing the same thing. So it definitely has a decent social component, and we do get off track on the book. And like all book clubs, it dissolves into non-book clubbing. Any other book clubbers, any other book club people can correct me if I'm wrong, because any of you are in my book club.
Thank you. I think that covers it. Philip, next question's for you. Do you run into having too many places to capture design, decision, feedback, and struggle to return to them in the future? Do you have what happens when you get too many to-dos and all of that? And
yeah, I mean, that is definitely a very valid question, and where things kind of work, I think, comes down to who's involved and where they work best with those things. I think one thing that's very important, every project that we work on includes typically a tech lead. So from the developer standpoint, they're kind of running and making sure that there's things aligning there so that information gets passed along to the rest of the team and so on. So if you're able to have that point person, whether it's a developer or designer that can help, maybe it's even your project manager to help facilitate that, and keep that collective information together, that sort of thing can be very helpful. I think there's also just kind of knowing where does the team like to have those sort of things, and it's a lot of it's just kind of some legwork to make sure that you've got somebody that's on top of where those things are and where they live.
Awesome. Thank you. The next question is also for you.
Oh,
Um,
all right.
do you have any good Figma plugins for doing the decomping and specking that you mentioned? They kind of had a comment in here that they're not a big fan of Figma Measure.
So I would totally love to hear what maybe Andrew, Marani, or Heather have ever worked with this. But me, I'm really simple here. I just make a layer with really bright colors and boxes and just do it that way. Like just so it's something that can be turned on and turned off, overlaying everything. It's nothing fancy. I think there's a lot with plugins, and I think that's one of my favorite things about Figma is there's a lot to plugins, but at the same time, just some simple boxes gets the job done too.
Andrew, Marani, anything to add?
Yeah, we just did this the other day, and in a little bit different way. We opened a Miro board, so a different tool, but helpful in the age of remote working. So everyone could jump in there in Miro and crop all the images of the screen to the correct size, and then debate what makes a component and such. That helped quite a bit.
I think it depends on I don't have a set resource for it. It just depends on the level of how quick I want to get it done. So I'll do it like Philip. Sometimes I'll go into Miro if I'm going to share it with other, if I want to do it within a team, like other people. And I know when we used to be at the office and we, used to meet in person and collaborate with each other, we would do these with a physical, print out of the site and just put it on the wall. This just helped us kind of brainstorm and collaborate a little bit more when it came to decomping these for development.
Oh, offices. So 2019 of us. Okay, so next up, I've got a question for Jeremy. Can you share personal examples of what you find in healthy and positive design team environments? Just need a little hope that not all places are toxic and overworking new designers and saying they should appreciate the opportunity in the role. Wow.
Great question. I've been there, so I understand where you're coming from there. I think some personal examples, just sharing about our team a little bit. We really try to connect personally, and everybody cares about each other, which is something that I've seen at other places where there was some backstabbing and back channel things that are happening, but we started meeting together weekly as a team, and just really the first half hour of our meetings are just talking about what you did this weekend. We have them on Mondays. Things that we did last week that were awesome. Some highlights, sharing about that, sharing about what's coming up this week. What are people working on? If people stressed about something, do we need to do a design review on anything? So that, just having that regular meeting really helps kind of just build that rapport with people. I think, one of the things we look for when we hire is humility, and just making sure that people genuinely do care about others and care about, giving good feedback. And then also on the flip side, having the ability to receive critical feedback in a way that is seen as, the team is trying to make them better and make the project better. So I think at the core, those are kind of the ones I think of when I think of a team that's operating well. And you can those are principles that go beyond a design team too, right? Those you can apply that to anywhere in life, a family, a sports team, whatever. So those are just kind of core things I see.
Yeah, groups of humans, right? That's, it's all about figuring out how to get the people who have the right skills to work together and share what they know.
For sure.
Okay, next question for Philip. Any experience in PMs or developers pushing back on deliverables like wireframes as a communication tool or deliverable? I've seen instances where wireframes are seen as a waste of time for developers.
That is such a fascinating question. The thing that I have in my own experience with a lot of developers is trying to get as much information early on. I think part of it is I would definitely say the things that I've seen in developers wanting wireframes may be helpful in kind of saying these might be useful to them, particularly if you're having issues where there's frustration in getting designs or something and expectations being there of how something's going to work. A lot of those things can be headed off early on if the developers are working with the wireframes. Now, if they're saying, okay, no, these are just a waste of time, we don't want to mess with this at all. The one thing I would probably recommend, I think there's still usefulness from a design standpoint to use a wireframe to start getting those ideas together. But maybe you just start asking questions around the wireframe, not necessarily put it directly in their face and say, here, review this, but use the wireframe and ask some questions to them about the wireframe that they could help answer and make sure that there's nothing lost in that. I think Julie may have brought in some of this too, just like, you need volunteers. People need to be bought in on these ideas. And so sometimes it takes a little bit more of finding an ally and using these types of tools to bring on in, and maybe it's just working with a specific developer to start getting some buy-in on some improved communication.
Thank you. Okay, Julie, you're back. All right. You mentioned working with Kodak, who had to use internal people for usability testing. Where I work, using internal people is seen as not good enough research, in quotes. Do you have any advice?
Yeah. So if it's not good enough, then, and if they want more, if they're the ones who are asking for more real users, then you have to do the push for budget, right? If they can't make the users appear for you, then you will need maybe an outside recruiting firm, or maybe you need someone who can work with legal to get the right confidentiality or NDA sort of things, so that you can do it. I would say don't let that stop you from using people, because whether somebody, to be honest, like maybe you use that as your guerrilla usability testing, where you go around the office and you get people, because you know that now that you have to do a lot of legwork to get real users involved, you want to load that up for like a full hour-long session with all the things and already have your big problems uncovered. So I would approach it that way. I would also really try to get to the root cause of why you can't get real people, and try to resolve that, whether it is through legal, whether it's through making friends with account execs, customer support folks who have direct contact, and getting their trust in you so that they're willing to let you talk to their people.
Thank you. Okay, next up is a question for Jeremy. Any tips to efficiently implement design and development in the Agile method? We are working on Sprint 1 for aligning with developers, but we are facing timeline gaps and issues. I can't wait to hear what you say. This is a conversation you and I have had countless times. So, how do we get design working within an Agile Sprint methodology?
Yeah, like Rob said, great question. Something we've talked about a lot internally here. I think the issue, we've kind of done experiments around this for years because we use a lot of Agile principles. The thing that we ran into is, if you are strict Agile, it doesn't really allow for a lot of exploration and discovery in design and UX. So really at a high level, I think it's about finding ways to get that discovery, get that exploration to work within an Agile methodology. And so we've tried a lot of different things. Our projects tend to kind of take the shape of maybe some of the client teams that we work with too. So depending on how they like to work, we'll figure out how that fits in. But we've tried lots of different things where we create another lane for design that's kind of going in parallel to a sprint, development sprint. We've done some things. I've heard that called dual track Agile. So if that's something you're not familiar with, you could look that up. We've also tried some things where we have design cards in the sprint, and we're trying to keep design ahead of development. So we're doing some explorations in design really for the next sprint or next couple sprints out to do the development work. So kind of staying ahead that way. I think it's about just trying to figure out how to I guess another thing is we've tried in discovery, even before sprints start, kind of doing some of that initial UX and design work. So those are different things that we've done on projects that we've kind of fit into the specific projects that we do. But I totally get the pain point here. And it really comes down to making sure that you're able to kind of get that double diamond like that Andrew showed in his talk. How can you get that divergent and convergent thinking working well, and figuring out ways to do that? So one of the things I mentioned in my talk too was about building in some checkpoints in the sprint for design to kind of stay involved with that, give feedback there. So there's kind of like the front end side of it where you're in discovery, you're just trying to experiment, you're failing, you're trying to figure out where to go, and you get to a solution, trying to figure out how to make that work. And then there's also the, toward the end of the project or middle of the project, how do you keep design involved with that we talked about a little bit earlier.
Let's move on to Philip. Do developers prefer to get decomp designs without HTML tags or prefer the designs with HTML tags? It was mentioned to not leave room for assumptions. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Do your developers like that? Right. That's probably what it's going to come down to in most cases, is finding out what do the people that you're working with like to have and want to have. Yes, you may, especially as you get into a better groove, and we were talking about like group improv, of like you get into a level of working where you're working together so well together that you don't need to have that level of explanation and over explanation. And so when you're in the process of still getting it out, is talking to them, asking what would be helpful, what kind of things do you need to know and be aware of. I think there is a certain level where it makes sense to go into the depths of what HTML elements should be used. I have done that in the past. There are other times where the developer I know is very well experienced and has a good idea of how to go ahead and select what element needs to be used. And so I don't go through to that level, but I talk about what kind of things make sense and how these things need to break down, because I'm kind of looking at when you're doing the design, there's a lot of looking at the big picture, where how do all these things fit together. And oftentimes the developer is getting a little bit more in the weeds and getting that one particular element, that one particular component put together. So definitely talk to your developer, talk about what they would like and would be helpful for them.
Yeah, that's talk to people. Always a good idea. Okay, let's skip down. And Andrew, here's a question for you. Hello, how can I fight burnout as a designer?
Oof. Good question. I think that's probably different for everyone, but for me, at least, I like to try to do some like non-design related creative thinking or creative projects. For me, that's photography. Getting outside into nature and hiking around kind of combines like two of my passions, hiking and photography. So I'll go for a walk, take some pictures, and that kind of just lets me think creatively, but outside of like working on a project. And that's, you can be a lot more creative in that case without having boundaries of budgets and things, just letting your mind go and kind of getting back to the root of what we all like doing as designers, right? Being creative. But yeah, definitely just trying to step away and get a break from the problem at hand, I think is at least helpful for me. I don't know if some other designers on this call have some ideas that they use, but anyone want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, I know, similar to what Andrew said, like stepping away from, if you're on a long-term project and you're doing, looking at the same thing for long periods of time, it's helpful maybe sometimes to step away and work on another project that you feel passionate about. That's there's an interest that you have there. I know I've worked with a couple designers on just giving them some quick design exercises that are fun and something that they care about and that are just I think quick is the key. Don't create something long term for yourself that you might dread or have trouble keeping up with. But those can kind of keep you fresh and give you a little bit of a different perspective and exercise, some different muscles, as well.
All right, next question for Heather. I'd love to know how you've handled any situations where accessibility and popular design patterns, features, trends have been in conflict, and the client really wants the popular design trend. What do we do?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think the first thing to mention is that when we work, all the clients that we work with, they know we talk about accessibility from the very beginning. They know that when they work with us, they're getting that we approach everything through that lens. And with that, it does happen when there's something that a client really, really wants. But knowing how we work and how we evaluate things, we will parse through the really delicate conversations, really listen to why they may want that popular design trend, and then look for alternatives. And to make sure that we have the different things that we could present to them. The other thing is education. Education is huge. And so I know I've had things where I've gone and I've found an article with an example as to, why we should do something a certain way. So a lot of it is listening, presenting alternatives, and educating.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Marani, next one's for you. How do you pick which competitors to include in a competitive review? For example, in my industry, nobody is really doing UX and design very well. So if I use our direct competitors, we look great. Any recommendations there?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this during my talk, but I think it's super valuable to see what others are doing, direct competitors within your industry. But it's also okay to look at indirect competitors. And I think more when you're looking at UX design patterns rather than actual business competitors. So when it comes to that, I think it's okay to look at a variety of websites and not just your industry. I think we've definitely had situations like that with other projects, and we just end up looking everywhere for stuff to compare.
Awesome. Thank you. Heather, one question for you. For a startup at MVP stage, to what extent should a designer think about accessibility? I think I know what you're going to say, but we'll let you say it.
Yeah. Oh, you should definitely be thinking about it from the very beginning. It actually even starts before, it starts with content. So it starts even, as you're working with the client and they're pulling together that content, it even starts at that point. And so when it's coming to you as a designer, think about as simple as the colors you are using and making sure there is appropriate color contrast. That's one of the really very basic things that we can do. So yeah, definitely it's something, there are little things we can do to make a big difference.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so we've got time for one more question, and it's a group question. And if everybody could spend 30 seconds giving us your quick answer, right? The question is there anything you'd wish you'd known as a recent grad, a new designer, in landing your first permanent design role? Any advice?
I can just jump in. This is the first thing I say to anybody, because I didn't have this, is find a mentor. Find somebody that can just work with you and you can share things with and just get advice from. I lacked that for the first half of my career, basically. And once I had it, it was just eye-opening. And I didn't realize how much my design skills had really atrophied over the years because I didn't have that feedback.
I'm going to jump in and say that when you do get your first job, in any of your downtime or board time, not enough to do, volunteer yourself for everything. It's better to be seen as the utility player who's willing to help out than it is the person who isn't helping out, or that you don't get to meet enough people because you're not getting, enough visibility by just being a helper.
I feel
I'm
like, oh, go ahead, Heather.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm going to jump in and say, and the thing that helped me a lot is joining meetups. Look on meetup.com and just find a local UX group. And especially now that a lot of people are remote, a lot of workshops and such are online. So definitely just make some connections through Meetup.
For me, I wish I knew a little more about how the business of design worked. How does a firm make money? I feel like I could have added, some more value to the work I did, knowing how the firm made money, and the efficiencies and things that were there and why they were there. So
I'd say don't forget to keep learning. I think you'll probably learn more in your first job or your first or second job than you did during school. That's a great opportunity to learn a wider variety of skills too, as you have access to people doing different things, whether you're a designer learning more about UX or maybe learning about code more. Talk to your colleagues, meet one-on-one with them, and just learn as much as you can. Take advantage of that.
Ronnie?
Yes. I would say the biggest thing for me that I learned was just getting comfortable with the way I talked about my work. I think that's really important. And I think employers sometimes even care more about what you have to say about the process, like how you got there, rather than just showing pretty designs, especially when it comes to UX. So yeah, just getting comfortable and practicing that would be good.
Yeah, I think that's all great advice. And I think the last thing that I want to add real quick is if it's okay not to know. If you're in an interview process and somebody asks you a question, start with, that's a great question, and I look forward to learning the answer. That's okay. You're at the beginning. It's okay not to have all the answers at this point. So that's all the time we have today. It went super quick. Thank you to all of the speakers and panelists. Appreciate your time, and all the people who decided to call in and be a part of what we're doing today. It's been a ton of fun.
Hey, thanks again for checking out this video. If you want to learn more about how we're building a better web, visit us at sparkbox.com.